On to the Dean's Lecture Series. I'm so excited to have my friend Joe Merlino here today to present on this. I think you're going to present on the STESSA project, the USAID grant.
Yeah, the Egypt, the beginning of the Egypt thing. Yeah.
Yep. And so I'm part of that. So is Michael and Samantha. Mary Jo was part of it, but she's enjoying retirement now. And so it's a very exciting project. And so I'm so happy that he agreed to come here and present. So I'm going to read his bio and then I'm going to turn it over to Joe. And then I have to leave because I have to, another thing I have to do. So Jen Katz-Bonacontro is going to help at the end with fielding questions. Thanks, Jen. Okay, so Joe Merlino is one of the founders of the 21st Century Partnership for STEM Education, 21P STEM, and has served as its president since its founding in 2007. He has 33 years of experience in education, beginning his career as a math tutor and a high school math teacher. He has been a principal or co-principal investigator and or project director on numerous federal grants. Joe currently directs a sub-award on a 4-year USAID grant, the Education Consortium for the Advancement of STEM in Egypt, or ECASE. Joe leads a 21P STEM team who have designed and implemented a new integrated STEM curriculum and assessment system for the Ministry of Education that is regarded as a model for the country. He also is co-PI on a 5-year NSF-funded research project studying innovation through institutional integration in 6 higher education institutions. He has been a PI for the 6-year IES-funded 21st Century Center for Research and Development and Cognition and Science Instruction, which involved 180 middle schools in a large-scale randomized control trial to test the effectiveness of cognitive science interventions to improve science learning. And I could go on, but you can see he's a very accomplished man. He's very busy, and he brings teams together to do amazing work. So at this time, Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you, and thank you once again for being here.
Thank you, Penny. And thank every one of you for spending some time this morning with you. I think we're going to have a fun time. I think it's going to be interesting. I always enjoy this. Currently, subsequent to our first grant with Egypt, 21P STEM became the prime on a follow-up grant, a $24 million grant, where we are designing, along with Penny's help and others here at Drexel and 4 other universities, a full replacement teacher preparation program for 5 Egyptian universities in 5 majors. It's an integrated STEM program. Penny will be helping to develop 141 new courses. And these universities have, it's all going to be in English, have decided to accept pretty much everything that we designed for them. As I said, in addition to Drexel, we have 4 other universities involved. And the Egyptian universities, the 5 universities, have all agreed to do the same thing. Now, if you can imagine any 2 universities agreeing to do something, that's amazing. Have 5 is like ridiculous. Now, the other thing is that these universities are twice the size of Penn State. Their normal enrollments maybe about 150 to, in some cases, 225,000. So it's a big job, but they are thrilled to have the U.S. folks involved. We have Cal Poly, CSU Fresno, Arcadia, and Temple involved as well. And we have some consultants from Virginia Tech. So it's a big project. We have about 100 people on our side. We also have a Cairo office there of about 20 people. The picture that you're seeing behind me is actually from the Holiday Inn on the Nile, which is kind of where our informal office is. This is where all of our meetings take place and all our professional development. And there's feluccas in the background there. These are sailboats that people rent out. And so this is, if you went to the Sofitel, or sorry, the Holiday Inn, and you stayed on the Nile view, this is what you might see. But I'm going to show you some other pictures. I'm going to start off a little informally, talking about just how this got started and something about the culture that I have. You know, I grew up in South Jersey, and I've lived in this area for, I don't know, 40 some years in different places between growing up, and I currently live in Delaware County. My office is in Conshohocken, but I grew up as a homeboy. I didn't really even have a passport, so this whole Egypt experience was quite a shock for me. So I'm going to take you on a little journey and talk about how we did, how we got involved in this, which I think is pretty amazing. So, Eric, you're going to help me if I screw this up, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let me share my screen, see if this works. Okay. And I got to, what do I got to do, Eric? I got to play the.
Yep, just play from beginning on your left-hand side.
Okay. So I call this From Conshohocken to Cairo. That is a pic of Conshohocken in the beginning, and what you see on the bottom is a pic of our office in Cairo. And the first time I went, I was surprised at how small the Sphinx was, but the pyramids, maybe that's only in contrast to the pyramids. So let me tell you how I got into this. I was minding my own business in Conshohocken in August 2011 when I get a call from the International Visitor Center. And they said, we have a delegation of Egyptians coming to Philadelphia, including the Minister of Education, and they want to know about STEM. And can you help them? And I said, well, you came to the right place, because I pretty much know everybody that's doing anything in STEM in Philly, because I've been doing it for a long time here. And I said, by the way, how did you get to know, how'd you find me? And they said, we Googled you. So I said, okay. So I didn't know these guys. They didn't know me. They spent a week here, and we sent them around to different places, the Franklin Institute with the Science Leadership Academy, Carver, Mass Charter School, etc. And they got a sense. And then they came back into our office for a 2-hour presentation. And so my staff is around the edge, and here they are. The top guy was the minister. He's the lawyer. He got his PhD in French, and the guy to the left is Reda Abasari. I'll talk about him later. And there's me and my colleague. So we're talking and describing some of the stuff that we've been doing, and they say, we want to start a new school, and a STEM school. I said, okay, that's nice. I said, well, do you have a curriculum? And they said, no. I said, well, have you trained any teachers? And they said, no. I said, well, when are you opening your school? And they said, next month. So I said, good luck, Your Excellency. That's what they call them. You have a big job ahead of you. So as he's leaving my office, he whispers in my ear, this is in August now, I'll see you in Cairo. So I didn't know if to take him seriously or not. I didn't have a passport. I said, well, maybe I should get a passport. Well, it turns out I did find myself in Cairo, and 4 months later. And just to give you a kind of sense of the culture shock, in Conshohocken, they call this sort of Center City North. This is like one of the largest structures in Conshohocken. When you get to Cairo, it's a little different. That's the kind of largest structure there. Likewise, get a sense of the scale here. These stones are really massive. So in Conshohocken, we have a MARRIOTT. It's a kind of a flagship in Conchi. There's a MARRIOTT on the Nile. The twin towers are where the hotel is. In the middle part is the summer palace that was built by the Queen of England, or I think a princess. That's the entrance to the MARRIOTT in Conshohocken. That's the that's the entrance to the Marriott in Cairo. It's on an island called Zamalek. And so this is where we initially stayed when we got there. In CONSHOHOCKEN, now when we got there, things had been in turmoil. In CONSHOHOCKEN, here's what the security looks like in CONSHOHOCKEN. In Cairo, this is what the security looks like. Literally, there was a tank by the TJF Fridays, and so which we had to walk through. And likewise, shopping in CONSHOHOCKEN is kind of like this, kind of a nice suburban area, and this is what it's like in Cairo. Khan El Khali Bazaar, which if you've never been there, you got to go. And although normally the scenery in Cairo is of the three pyramids and it looks like in a desert, when you go on the opposite side, it's actually part of a suburb. And this is in Giza, which is on the other side of the Nile across in Cairo. And likewise, it's not something you normally see in CONSHOHOCKEN or Philadelphia. So you're driving along a road and to your left is a Mercedes and to your right is a donkey cart. So this was all a bit of a culture shock to me when I first got there. This is the school that they basically took over. It was a former military school, and it's called the 6 October STEM School for Boys. This is a government school. In other words, it's public school. It's a residential school. It's the only residential school, government school. And it's for the top 98 percentile. So it's very high achieving kids that got in here. And 6 October refers to the 6 October War. And I won't say they're proud of it, but they are proud of it in the sense of the gallantry and heroics of their soldiers. So we went to this school when we first got there, and we're sitting in the principal's office, and this actually is in the middle of nowhere when we got there. And in walks Rada, who I saw you, and he says, "Welcome to the dream." And we thought, there was three of us there altogether, and we thought, oh my God, what are you talking about? What the dream was redesigning, reconceptualizing what school was all about. That's the dream. And he had gotten freedom from all of their tests that they normally do. They had gotten freedom to invent things. In other words, freedom from any standards, from any pre-existing curriculum. So it was literally a desert in terms of the actual curriculum. A year later, they opened up a school for girls, also without a curriculum. Now, this is a scene when we first got there. The former minister the minister who I pointed out to you, the first piece of news I got was that he had resigned. And this is the new guy. And the first meetings that we had there were with the Minister of Education and his team. And if you can imagine being in this room, and of course you can't speak English. I mean, you can't understand the Arabic unless you know Arabic. And we're being treated like VIPs. And quite frankly, we don't know what we're doing, but we're there. And this is a big deal. It's a $25 million project from U.S. Agency for International Development. And here are my colleagues. The guy to the right taking the camera, some of you may know him. He's Frederick Bertley, former VP at the Franklin Institute, who was also a technical assistance guy, and some of our translators there. So we're listening in on, what they're saying and expecting us to do. Really don't have an idea of kind of what we're doing. The first thing we did is to meet with teachers, and we had to design this school, and we started without any assumptions, right? We didn't say we're going to have like math courses or biology courses. It was a total blank. And the first thing we did was ask them, what kind of school do you want? What's the exit outcomes you want for your students? So that's how we began this project. And what they did is they put a lot of stuff. We had sentence strips, and they put a lot of things on the board. This is teachers. We had about 25 of them. And they were divided into 3 buckets, you might say. What was the objects of knowledge? That is, things to be known, things about the interior self, and social norms, the social self. So when you put things like critical thinking or love of math, that would be in the yellow. If you're thinking about specific topics or objects of knowledge, that would be in the green. If you're thinking about, learning to cooperate with other people, that would be in the gray. So we divided the sentence strips into that. And as we're looking at this wall full of sentence strip, there's one thing that stood out that we said, what can be the cornerstone of designing the school? Because all of these things are important, but you need something, you have to have critical thinking about something. It can't be sort of an abstract platonic ideal. It has to actually be grounded in something. And so what they came up with is they said, we want to be able to have our kids solve or address Egypt's grandest challenges. That was one of the sentence strips. And I said, aha, that's how we're going to build the school. It's going to be based upon the grand challenges. Now, in the United States, the National Academy of Engineering has grand challenges. Many countries have what they call grand challenges, engineering challenges, but these are Egyptian grand challenges, such as improve the use of alternative energies. And first of all, when you go to Egypt, you can't help but see all of this as an issue, because Egypt is very solar intense, and yet they have very little solar energy. They have garbage all over the place, at least when we were there, because when we were there, it was during the revolution. Urban congestion, public health issues and disease, industrial-based pollution, of course, use of arid air, clean water. They have tremendous population growth, etc. And they affect the climate change. So this is what they sort of articulated. So we're thinking, okay, that's nice. How do we actually develop a curriculum around this? So we started and we put them through some exercises to see, is like one grand challenge more fundamental than the others? Can we start with alternative energies and then move to recycling and urban congestion? How do we go about this in terms of addressing these challenges? So the first thing we did is do a concept map. This may be a little hard to see. We basically, in those square boxes, put all the grand challenges, and we asked people, we did this as an exercise at their table, is to create a concept map of how they all go together. And so one teacher put this spaghetti diagram together. And as you can see, everything is related to everything else. Okay. So what we did, our concept is to have an integrated curriculum, and how we thought of integration was as a hand biologically is integrated, where the math, biology, chemistry, physics, and geology were all integrated. And the humanities was, the math is the thumb and the humanities is the palm. So our job was to take all of the courses and create a symphony, because our view of STEM is the symphonic sound of each of the disciplines when they work together towards some end in mind. So think of it like a curriculum is like a musical score, right? So the grand challenges was the sort of the theme of the music. It was the basis for pulling all of the subjects together. That's how we conceived of this. And how standards, et cetera, get involved here is that we begin with the core purpose of education, which in this case was to address the grand challenges of Egypt. From that, here, you see we developed themes, and I'll get into capstones. These are semester-long capstones. We designed the big ideas by subject. So we did have courses, the units of study, and then within those units of study, we put together learning outcomes. These are 1 to 3 weeks in length, and they have a learning outcome involves strategic thinking using Webb's depth of knowledge. And so a semester might have 8 to 12 learning outcomes in there. And all of our assessments are based upon learning outcomes. So we do it on that basis. And the daily lessons are down here. We designed the curriculum to this level, the treetop level. We left it to the green part here is where the teachers design their daily lessons. Now, where the standards, concepts, and skills comes in. We use standards, concepts, and skills as guide rails to make sure the big ideas of our subjects and our learning outcomes were aligned or matched the standards. So we use the next generation science standards and the Common Core and all the concepts and skills that were there, but we didn't start with the disciplines. We started with the core purpose of education and then derived the disciplines, derived the learning outcomes from that, constructed the units of study. So here's another way of looking at it. Chemistry, engineering, physics, biology, and geology were all oriented toward the grand challenges, and the math supports the sciences. Okay, the math we did last. Because if we did math first, it would crowd out everything else because it's so dominant. So we put math at the bottom, supporting all of the sciences. That's how we conceived of this curriculum. I'm not going to go over this, but we had a process by which we developed it. And it's basically a 3-phase process. The first thing we did here is identify the aspirations of the teachers and the public. What did they want Egypt to look like 10 to 20 years from now? Then the core purpose, then the broad learning goals. And then this was a set of design studios we have to draw out the disciplinary content based on the grand challenges and also any transdisciplinary connections. 7 is we outline the scope and sequence, and this is 10th, 11th, and 12th. We got feedback, and then we revised the scope and sequence, and then we attached the curriculum material. So you can see we didn't start with the textbook. The textbooks and everything else was kind of at the back end, and then the labs, etc. And then this, by the time we're at step 13, we piloted the 1.0 curriculum, and then we did a redesign of it. To do this, in January of 2013, so I'm there a year later now, we had our first design studio. We had 60 professors and teachers and Ministry of Education officials. And it was a 3-day, all-day workshop. And their job was to take the grand challenges and draw out their disciplinary content. So we had this big ballroom and literally disciplinary teams at each table talking about what was the specific content that they needed to address the grand challenges. So they didn't start with their discipline. They started with their grand challenges of Egypt. And then we broke into interdisciplinary tables to make the connections. So we left Egypt in January 2013 with a lot of data from these design studios. We went back to our CONSHOHOCKEN office, put them on index cards, big index cards, and we started to play around with how each of these disciplines go together. And it turned out sort of in an organic way that they chunked into 6 different buckets. matter, form, and function, energy and force, change and equilibrium, systems and feedback, communications and theories and models. So when we put all of the disciplines in, let's say, semester one, they all related to matter, form, and function in some way that pointed towards a grand challenge. And to cap this all off, to kind of pull this all together, we had what we called semester-long capstone projects, which was a regular course that addressed a grand challenge. Okay. Now, what was unique is that the assessment system put 60% of the students' grades in the first year and two were capstones. 60%. So it really put an emphasis on projects, and these were done in teams. It turned out to be, and it was very public facing. So right away, the ministry people could see from the get-go that this school was different, because no school had been does this before in Egypt. Now, they also had labs. The USAID bought them new schools, and well, they constructed their schools themselves, and then USAID provided labs and so on. So they were fully equipped with labs and resources to do the capstone projects. Very early on, these kids, you know, and they're in their dorms, so they don't have a lot to do, started working on their capstones and made it a real big priority for themselves. They were very collaborative. These are kids from all over Egypt who have never been away from school before and have never necessarily seen other kids from around Egypt. So just like in college, where kids come and, you know, for the first time they're away from home, and one of the values of college is interacting with people you don't know, this is how kids related, and they really formed quite a bond. These are small schools. There are only 450 kids in them. So what happened very early on is that these kids entered their capstone projects in science competitions. And lo and behold, they started to win them, when Egypt had never won, you know, big international competitions. I'm talking like ISEF, the International Science and Engineering Fair. And this further validated the curriculum. This is hard to see, but what this is a calendar where each of these colors represent a course here. And these are the units like right triangle trigonometry, cell biology, etc. This is the first semester. What we try to do is, as much as possible, is thematically line up matter, structure, and function. We try to line them up here. And the way we did it is using learning outcomes like an abacus, like beads on an abacus, right? Think of an abacus. And so we lined up the beads of each subject so that we would have some concordance. Our philosophy was that the integration of the curriculum does not take place on paper. It takes place in a student's head, in their mind. And the idea here is only to help them see those connections, to make things close enough synaptically that they could make these connections themselves. But the capstones help them to make it. Here's another example. This is an alluvial diagram. Up here is our learning outcomes. Here, this is chemistry, second year. This is the third learning outcome. And you see how it relates to other learning outcomes in biology in year 3. So you can see there's a lot of chemistry involved in biology, right? But what we did is deliberately try to make these connections as much as possible when we designed this course, designed this curriculum. Okay. So capstones, I mentioned capstones. By the way, if any of you have really pressing questions, please let me know, because I can't. The thing about doing Zoom is I can't get any reaction from the audience, so I don't know if you're following along, or if you're good with all this. Should I keep talking or should I pause for a minute?
Does anyone have any questions so far? We also can collect them in the chat.
Okay.
So yeah, so there are no questions in the chat. So feel free to finish or continue on, because we have until 11, I believe.
Okay.
And so then at the end, we can collect any questions or just have a discussion.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
So the capstone projects were really, this was done by our colleagues at Teaching Institute for Excellence in STEM, TIES. They're out of Ohio. So they're semester-long projects with real-life problems. They use the engineering design projects. They're done in groups. They're linked to learning outcomes in multiple subjects. We use the digital fabrication labs. They have a lot of portfolios, prototypes, and exhibitions. We have both individual and group evaluation, and we also have external evaluators, many of whom are from universities, judging these competitions. So here's an example of grade 10, semester 2. This would be the first year. Here is a capstone project, and this is their poster. It's not the actual prototype, dealing with an issue, but you can see, and these are done on big poster boards, laminated, and you can see the quality of the poster boards that are done. And this is very typical of these yeah, right. So in the STEM schools, there's about 27 classes a week. About 12 and a half of those are in science, technology, engineering, and math, and the other half are in the humanities. And so the humanities are also aligned with this, but how we got permission to do something new was the STEM was the selling point. That was kind of what got us in the door. And as long as you put STEM in front of something, they said, oh, okay, do it. So we have STEM assessment, STEM this, STEM that, and they said, fine, okay. But we definitely do have humanities in there. So I just want to show you, and I hope, Eric, you're going to have to help me out here. I hope I can do this, but I just want to show you like a minute clip of, one of these. Hopefully this will work. Can you hear this?
Can't hear it yet. You might want to try stopping share and then reshare again.
Is it working now?
So we can see the video, but not hear any audio. So try clicking stop share again. If not, I could share the video for you.
Okay, could you do that?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
You want me to stop share? All right, are you in control?
Yes.
Okay. Just do like a minute of it. No, that's not the right one. But there, that's it.
Is that correct, Joe?
No,
No? Okay, hold on one sec.
it's the one before that. Okay. That's it. Do you have that, Eric? I mean, Eric? All right. Are you there?
Yeah. Were you able to hear and see the video or no?
No.
Okay, hold on one second.
All right, I can just move on.
Sure. Okay, fine.
Yeah, I mean, well, I tell you what, let me just share it and you can just see it, what the, it's because I'm only going to play a minute. So this is something that, can you hear me talk?
Yes.
These are projects that the kids were doing as part of their capstone projects. So they actually built, this guy's building an artificial aesthetic. We have digital fabrication labs. The teachers are selected. They have to pass exams. They go through extensive professional development. And here's an example of a capstone project. And you can't hear them, right?
Correct.
So in the ISEF, we have the Egyptian ISEF, and that then it's sort of like American Idol. They go to Hollywood, in this case, it's Los Angeles, to compete in national ISEF. These are the STEM schools. These are our Armani girls. Uh, anyway, let me stop share. Okay, can I want to try to get back to.
Yep, you could just close out of your browser, stop share, and then share back your
I'm
presentation.
trying to get out of my browser.
You might have to stop the share first.
I'm trying to.
Sure.
I don't know how to.
I can do it for you. There.
It's not letting me return. Okay, here I am. Okay. So let me go back and share the rest of this. Am I sharing my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, we designed this using the capstones. The girls had, they won. And one of the girls came in first, Yasmin Mustafa, and they had a NASA named an asteroid after her. She had dinner with President Sisi. He was so impressed. She became like a rock star in Egypt. She was a lot of publicity. We started with basically 2 schools, where right now we're up to 19 schools. Our new contract, which we're in our 3rd year now, has us going to 27 STEM schools. And to develop a new teacher preparation program on top of that as well. These are some of the, you can't read it all, but this is 6 October, just the 6 October school, and the awards that they've won. This would be a great video. If you can play this, Eric, with the sound, I think they'll get a sense of the impact of these schools. Is that possible?
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to go ahead and share my screen?
Yeah, if you can do that.
Okay, hold on one sec.
If there's sound, can you make it with sound? Are you hearing it?
We can hear.
Yep.
I believe I do my best work under pressure.
When I was a little girl, having the opportunity to go to school like this seemed impossible.
I wanted to go so badly because I was eager to start a new life full of learning.
My name is Nada.
My name is Azza.
My name is Nurhan. When I got my acceptance letter, I couldn't believe I was one of 120 students chosen from all of Egypt.
My father didn't agree at the beginning. He thought girls shouldn't study at boarding schools. Every night at dinner for 2 months, I told my father that I am going to go to the school. He said, "No, Nada, you are not."
It was not a normal thing in my family for girls to live away from home. They did not believe that I could stand alone.
I challenged myself and succeeded.
I'm studying to become a mechanical engineer,
A computer scientist.
A nuclear physicist. There is no such thing as a mansion. My laptop is my weapon.
my 3D printer is my right hand.
My microscope is my window to the world. Sometimes it's hard because we face a lot of obstacles.
But there is a difference between difficult and impossible.
Being a girl is not an excuse.
This is a turning point in my life. I believe that if I don't believe in myself, no one else will.
Today, I'm a student.
Tomorrow, I will be a woman who will change the world.
One of the things that these kids, these young boys, these young men and women, when they have gone on to U.S. universities as well, Bryn Mawr, Penn, Swarthmore, Haverford College, they get scholarships to go because they're too poor. The very wealthy Egyptians go to private school. These kids come from modest or poor backgrounds. One student, I recall, when we first opened 6 October, was actually greeted in his hometown, his little village. They had like banners welcoming him because he had been accepted to these schools. So these are kids that go on, and it's not just the knowledge that they have and that they get. People who are very close to the schools, the Egyptians themselves, our staff, say the biggest difference that you see from a 10th grader to a 12th grader is their emotional and sociological maturity, personal, their maturation, and how they go from being extremely competitive, just, so I can do well on a test. That's their biggest thing, and be very competitive individually and just focus on themselves, to an idea of a larger vision for themselves, a larger vision that it's really the country that they're responsible for, and that they're in it together and they work together. And that's the ethos of the school. And every time I go over there, I say, you're going to be the future leaders of Egypt. And most recently, just in the last week or so, President Sisi has created a fund for young entrepreneurs. And the head of that fund is now talking with the STEM schools to be able to support high school students into understanding intellectual property and how to enterprise some of their developments. We don't realize often that when Einstein wrote his 4 famous papers on the equivalence of math and matter and energy and general relativity, he was only 26. And when you think about Google and Zuckerberg and Gates, these were all young people. And so our view is really we're creating a new leadership cadre of young people, at least in this country, that has a vision that is larger than themselves and a sense of responsibility, which is greater than themselves as well. And with the technical knowledge as well as the humanities that they have in order to fill that role. So we'll see. They have graduated. I'll just tell you one last anecdote, and I'll leave it open to questions. So by now, we've had, as I said, we're up to 19 schools, but our original school, 6 October, we were able to see them graduate high school and college, and they come back to Egypt. And so we had one young lady come back, and she was being interviewed by 200 Egyptian professors. We had these kids interviewed by you should see them. They're pretty amazing. So she said, he said, well, how did you do? They went to Arizona State. This young lady went to Arizona State. How'd you do? She said, I got a 4.0. She said, what was the most difficult year? The first? No, that was the easiest because we already had that at the Egyptian schools. I said, where are you going next? They said. She said, I'm going to Georgia Tech. I have a full scholarship for a PhD. What are you studying? Biomechanical engineering. Why? Because I want to investigate lung cancer. And they said, will you return to Egypt? And her reply was, if I can solve the problem of lung cancer, it will help, not only help Egypt, it will help everyone else. This is their mindset. So I'm really proud of these kids. And, what hurts me, though, is that I have difficulty bringing it back to the United States. But that's another webinar to tell you that story. So with that, I think I'll just open it up to any questions. We have not talked about the STESSA project as much in terms, that's what Mike and Penny is involved with, Mike Kozak, in terms of designing these courses. But I will just tell you the higher education piece is also based on grand challenges, and we see a concordance, a relationship between the STEM schools and the university. They're not separate, they're in harmony in terms of what we're doing. And the professors so far in Egypt, we have about 200 of them, have really been very cooperative and fantastic and willing to cooperate. So we're not going to launch that program until next September because we have to design the curriculum, but it's moving at warp speed, at light speed to get approved by the Supreme Council of Universities. So by the way, I am available after 11 if any of you want to stay on and chat a bit. So, but let me open the floor now to any of you if you are interested.
Yeah, so Mr. Merlino, thank you so much for that very impactful presentation. I don't know about anybody else, but my eyes were starting to water up when I think I saw Michael's eyes too. I was like, even across Zoom, we can feel things, right? When the girl was talking about the impact in her involvement and convincing her dad for the right to go to school, that was very moving. We have 3 questions in the chat.
Okay.
And the first one was about soft skills. The second one was about the integration of the humanities. And the third one was about the specific engineering design process used. I'm going to start with the third one because you did touch a little bit on the first 2 topics. And so the question is, was there a specific engineering design process you used? And maybe just tell us a little bit about that to get us started.
Well, I'm not the capstone expert. I will say we have engineers involved in the design of it. It was done by a guy that used to work at Battelle. It was the largest nonprofit research center, and it's the cycle of question posing, brainstorming, etc. There's that design wheel of engineering. That what is different about it is it's pretty high stakes, and they have to write the journal questions. We write journal questions for them. The kids have got to answer, so we monitor them every step of the way. In that, we start them with a very structured. In the beginning, it's fairly structured in terms of the procedures. By the time they get into their senior year, which they have 1 capstone, it's much more open-ended in terms of what they want to do. So I can, if people really want to get into it, I have a guy that can give you all the ins and outs of the capstone process, but it's sort of a hallmark of these schools. The other question you raised, okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, the question about the soft skills was interesting because it was about understanding cross cultures. How did you figure out what the core concepts of those soft skills are that you wanted to teach? The girls articulated a number of different things, but how did you have to work with any cross-cultural understandings about communicating or getting consensus about the meaning behind the different skills?
We did not specifically teach a skill in the sense of it being, okay, today we're going to teach you about collaboration. We provided a ton of professional development to the teachers. And so in the professional development, we modeled, inquiry learning, student-centered instruction, and all of that in collaboration. I think what happened with the soft skills is that just the environment, the fact that there was a purpose to the schools. The schools had a mission, and it wasn't just a rhetorical mission. It was throughout every aspect of it that we're here to solve our country's problems. So in the design of the capstones, in the design of the courses, in the professional development, etc., this was a sort of an expectation. Presentation skills, for example, they were expected in all of their classes to do presentations, to do posters, to present to their classes. All of those aspects of a student-centered approach we emphasize. So if you actually, and they did it in English, and that was not our choice. The Egyptians wanted these schools to be in English because if they don't know English, they are limited in terms of their international ability to communicate and so on. But when you see these kids, if you ever get a chance to talk to and hear these kids, they're amazing in their presentation skills. I don't know if Mary Jo's still here, but she can tell you that, and just how they relate to each other. So I don't know how it happened. I think it's just organic. And it flows from the mission that this is not about being in competition with each other. So they went from a me to a we orientation. And I think the rest just followed.
We're drawing to a close because it's almost 11. We have one more question about.
But like I said, if you want it, I can. It's up to you, Jen. But I get, if people want to still.
Okay.
That's okay
Yeah.
with me.
Eric, do we have the Zoom for a little bit longer? Or?
So 11:30.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. That's great. The next question is about creativity and creative problem solving. I know creative problem solving, that cycle you mentioned with engineering, that design process is very similar to, creative problem solving process. What are your thoughts on the creativity aspect? Was it just included in terms of the engineering design process, or was there any other focus on creativity?
We took this position. Kids are naturally creative, particularly the younger ones are, kids are creative. They're always thinking about stuff. So what limits their creativity is by putting a lid on the whole schooling process. We took the lid off. We said this school has a purpose to it. It's about solving problems. We expect you to be innovative. We expect you to think differently. So they said, oh, really? Yeah. And, each student had a laptop, one-to-one laptop. So they were on the web all the time. They were on social media all the time. If they didn't know something in a book, they would go out and find it. They would talk to each other about what they found. So there was a lot of chatter among themselves. There was a lot of self-discovery. And we didn't say, this is all about getting to pass your final exams. That was never. And how we did it is our assessment system at the end modeled that. So capstones was a factor in your final grade. Practical exams. Do you know how to operate something in the lab? It was a multi-mix. It wasn't just one final exams, and the capstones were 20% of it. So it was a sense that you had freedom, and with that freedom and a purpose, a direction, what we wanted collectively you to do. And because of that, they and the Egyptians are pretty creative people. I mean, after all, they did do the pyramids. So there's a lot of DNA there, 5,000 years worth. So we just said, okay, go for it. And they come up with amazing, and what happens is that as one group of kids come up with something different, in their capstones, it becomes a cultural norm within the students that, yeah, I'm going to outdo you. I'm going to really think. So one thing led to the other. And then you had graduates coming back. So it just reinforced itself. Jen, are you quarterbacking this?
I am.
Okay.
I am. I'm looking through the chat, and you said that humanities were involved, and we had a question about whether history or ancient history or cultural history was integrated in explicitly.
Yeah.
And then I would add a question about the arts too.
Yeah. So in terms of the humanities, we did not design the humanities curriculum or the learning outcomes for the humanities. because they also teach Arabic. And the reason that we didn't is because we did not have expertise in that, but B, that had to be, really had to know the culture, because we didn't want to get into any kind of cultural sensitivities to them. So we were known as the STEM people, and we had permission, an entree into that world, because that was the entry ticket that got us in. The humanities, we had to take a facilitating approach, so we left it to our partners, our Egyptian partners, to design the curriculum and also to do the professional development. But it is half of the school.
Did you involve the arts at all? Because STEAM is really popular. I know, at least in the School of Education, there are a number of STEAM researchers. Were there any specific arts aspects that were emphasized, or is that just sort of not necessarily an explicit part of it?
The arts were not an explicit part of it, except for the design part of it in terms of the capstones. When I came back, this is another story, but you know, this Independent Seaport Museum, right down there. As soon as we got the curriculum designed in September 2013, the Independent Seaport Museum serendipitously called me and said, "Can you do something for us?" And initially I resisted because I didn't have the time, but I basically told him three things. I said, because he wanted to do something STEMmy, and I said, well, you can either, try to do something with a science museum internally, you can adopt a school, or you can do something really big. And he said, well, what's that? And I said, totally rethink the purpose of schooling in Philadelphia and involve the arts and humanities with and the resources of the city together. So you would have a city as classroom. And he says, I like the third. So that began a multi-year effort to design a STEAM curriculum with the idea that the resources of the city would actually be part of it. And we had the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance as part of it. The very first meeting, I had 25 arts people at the meeting at the Seaport Museum. And I told them the concept of what we did in Egypt. And they said, oh my God, you mean we could be the horse and not the cart? I said, yes. So I absolutely believe that the arts should be front and center, but we need to reconceive this. And I do have a paper I wrote, it's going to be on our website, about the Greater Philadelphia STEAM Initiative. And we used a similar design process to come up with the key purpose of education in Philadelphia. It was not to solve the Philadelphia's grand challenges. Instead, it was around diversity and inclusion as the core purpose. So if you're all interested, I can give you the link to that paper. The Barra Foundation, we got a small grant to put together these design studios. We did 8 of them. We had about 130 people participate across 70 organizations. So I absolutely believe that the arts need to be front and center for their own sake, not to help math, for their own sake. That's my position. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I think I talked to you a couple years ago because we have.
I do. I remember you. I remember your name.
Yeah. We have a creativity program here at Drexel. And Freddie here, who's on the call, was our first inaugural dean for the School of Education. She's a creativity researcher. She's an educational psychologist. So we do have creativity classes specifically in the School of Education. And then you can get a master's in creativity and innovation, and you can concentrate in it in the EDD program. So there's a lot of students who are very interested in it as well.
Well, I'd love to be able to work with Drexel and bring this to Philadelphia and in a sort of lab school or a demonstration school of some sort. We do have some resources at 21P STEM, and we've got a lot of folks involved, and I think perhaps with Drexel, we could really put something terrific together. That's another webinar.
Well, it's great to have this connection with you and the Egyptian program, the STESSA project, and the work that you're doing there seems so impressive. So thank you for working with the School of Education. I understand we have additional, staff and faculty that are going to start working with you and developing curriculum this year as an outgrowth of that.
Yeah, that in 2021, I've been working on this to try to find a venue for it. And maybe Jen, I can send a link to you for the paper, and maybe you can distribute it. It's about a 60-page description of this. My colleague and I are Deborah Pomeroy. Some of you may know her, and I are about halfway done a book on this, and we'll be talking about Egypt. And we also did a similar project in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Similar, and also in Turkey. So, but our Egypt project is the biggest. But I would love to do something around the arts and STEAM. But again, it's not STEAM. There has to be a purpose to the school that informs the direction of the curriculum. This is our kind of where we're coming from. But in any event, this is a whole nother conversation that I'd love to be able to have with you at some point, but maybe we can start with that paper.
Yeah, that would be great. So do you want to email us your paper? We can distribute it to the list of people who signed up for this webinar.
Sure.
That'd be fantastic. I'd like to open it up to the floor. Does anyone else have any remaining questions at this point?
Don't be shy.
Just a comment, I guess. Joe, first of all, great presentation. Some of this I've seen before, and Jen called me out on it. Thank you, Jen. But it is an emotional kind of thing. So what's interesting, and I think you alluded to this slightly, is you're doing this work in Egypt, and yet so many of us at Drexel and at other universities are trying to do similar things in the US, whether it be Philadelphia or in other areas. And it seems that the resistance to that is intense. And even the whole idea from years ago of charter schools that would start this and be unrestricted, really, not that I'm aware, maybe a few exceptions, but haven't really developed the way that this project seems to be developing. I just was curious about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have three basic thoughts. One is that we had tremendous top-level political permission from the minister himself. So if you can imagine the governor of Pennsylvania or the mayor saying, or mostly it would have to be the governor saying, you're exempt from the PSSAs, you're exempt from the Keystones. All right, so you're going to invent your own, and it's going to be based on the purpose of your schools, and we're going to give you the resources to do that, the freedom to do that. That's number one. Number two, we had a great staff on the ground that knew things politically. I mean, this is very difficult to do. We knew things politically and how to manage that. And also, we had a theory of action, because I've been at this for a few years, it's about 3 decades. So, with NSF grants, with IES grants. And so what we did is we put together all the things kind of we knew worked, but our key thing was that we had to have a core purpose to the school that was not rhetorical, that would inform the design of the curriculum, whatever that was. And it had to be a core purpose that emanated from the needs of the community, in this case of Egypt. The third thing, I think, for its sustainability is connections to a university, connections to a teacher preparation program. Because unless you have teachers coming in, a supply of teachers and principals that could work in the schools, that had the training, that knew how to do it, it would fizzle out after a while. And that's the problem with charters, is that you get teacher turnover, you get principal turnover, and then you lose the whole philosophy of it and you lose the maintenance of it. So, and I think it needs to be, I mean, we started with one school, we're up to 19. So we have enough of a mass now, and we have proof of concept. I mean, these kids are winning things that they never won before. So it has a momentum to it. It's still very hard to do, but, and of course we had the resources to do it too. So you could do something. The governor of Pennsylvania could do something. But I think we need the universities involved as key partners in that, as well as folks on the ground.
Can't agree more.
Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense. Can't agree more. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I want to take a moment to wrap things up and to say that we really appreciate your time, and thank you everyone for your time during your day to join us, because we know that we have a lot of different competing things for your time. And so I would propose, if you follow up with us, you could email me or Penny or Anthony or Eric your link to your paper, and we can distribute it to all the people who registered for this event so that they get that, and then we can continue talking about.
Yeah, I'd love to do that.
Philadelphia, lots of different things.
Let me just say thank you to all of you. It was my pleasure. It was my honor to really to share what we've done, and I hope this was interesting, and maybe we can do something in the future. Freddie's an old friend, long time.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah.
Excellent. That's great. You have multiple ties to us. Then.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's I started in '89 in Philadelphia, worked when Connie Clayton was here, so you know that. But in any event, thank you very much, all of you, and best of luck to you in whatever pursuits you have, as well as, and hopefully we'll survive this jury day.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Thanks. Have a great day, everyone. And I'll see you in our next Zoom meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.